nuclear level drama happened in the last 24 hours, and it does have a good conclusion to the story, but there is still a lot of bad that's left in the aftermath of everything that happened that I want to talk about. So, we started off 24 hours ago with Brown Dust's devs and the development team announcing that they were going to now start censoring their characters and stuff to release it on different platforms like Steam. And within 24 hours, the community reacted very poorly, as anyone would expect, because if you know anything about Brown Dust, it is very well known for its infamous character designs, designs of its female characters with their outfits and all that, and let's just be honest, you have seen the ads, you have 100% seen the ads of Brown Dust to some shape or form, especially if you're a gacha game player. Like, if you play, let's say, Blue Archive, you play, ZZZ, you play Honkai Star Rail, or any of these type of games, you definitely have seen Brown Dust to some shape or form. And the thing is that Brown Dust has been this game that has just been shameless. It doesn't care. It has always been extremely shameless with its female character designs, which is completely fine. There's nothing wrong with it. That's just how they are. But the thing is that this was a game that was meant for, let's just be completely blunt, for the Gooners. People like playing the game. Nothing wrong with that. It has its appeal. And they announced that they were going to start censoring the characters, completely removing what, the actual core, I guess, fan base really likes about the game, and just completely tarnishing the very image of what they have built for a very long time. And here's the thing, the reaction from the community went as expected, very poorly. People did not like what happened. People were basically saying this is how you have end of service, EOS, how you kill your game, how nobody wants to associate with your platform anymore, and honestly, I completely agree. If I was a dedicated Brown Dust 2 player, or any kind of game, honestly, if I was a player for any dedicated game that went out of their way and just started censoring their stuff, I probably would just instantly drop the game and never want to touch it ever again. Because that's how I feel about it. Like, I'm an adult, I'm able to look at things if I want to look at things, I consent to it, and having someone retroactively remove or self-censor content after it's already out is just not okay with me. I am not a fan of that. That's completely against what I believe in, and as you all know, I'm a big advocate for creative expression and freedom within art, and when something like this goes down, it instantly, I don't want to touch your game anymore. And this is the reaction that a lot of people had. A very normal reaction, honestly, after like the years of build-up and like community that Brown Dust has built for itself. And so, with the reaction being overwhelmingly negative, Brown Dust actually went out of their way to say that they have canceled the character redesigns and their upcoming policy update. For instance, they are restructuring it and, taking back everything they said 24 hours ago. Now, this sounds like amazing news. Obviously, they're not going through with it. They're not, like, wanting to censor anymore, censor character designs. But the question now is left in the air. How did this happen? Why did this happen, and why Brown Dust of all games? And what really sparked all of this to really happen like it is? So this is a post, from my understanding, the project director of Brown Dust, Junhee Lee. Now, I don't know if I pronounced that right. Please forgive me if I mispronounced that. But the point is this is directly from the project developer, or director of Brown Dust 2. And this is what they had to say about everything that went down in the last 24 hours. I sincerely apologize for any concern caused by our prior unclear responses and the lack of clarity following the January 10th developer note update. After reflecting over the weekend, I am now ready to share my decision with you. Number 1, cancellation of character design changes. None of the characters or costumes previously discussed in relation to this matter will be redesigned. All mentioned characters, including Teresa and Rifia, I'm probably mispronouncing it, please forgive me on that one, will remain exactly as they are. No content, including Slap Slap Pop, will be deleted. This is not a temporary or tentative decision. This is our final policy and will remain in effect throughout the service of Brown Dust 2. Now, before I continue reading, we need to really talk about this. First off, I'm going to give credit where credit is due, and I am happy that the project director went on record to start off this conversation saying, we listened, we hear you, we're not doing it, And for the indefinite future, we will not do this ever again. We will not try to redesign characters and self-censor or anything. We will keep Brown Dust as it always has been. This is legitimately a great way to start your actual update developer note for an apology. I'm just going to straight up say, this definitely is instantly allowing people to want to continue reading what this individual has to say, and maybe get a little bit more faith in the property, and, you know, figure out what really happened here in the first place. Because at the end of the day, before I read any further, you need to still ask yourself, how did this happen? Why would the project director and everyone else involved with Brown Dust, why would they make such a disastrous decision that would pretty much kill their whole game? Why? Well, there's obviously people that are already coming to some conclusions on how this happened. We'll get into that one, but let's keep reading. So regarding the Liberta skin, or Prestige skin, I would also like to address that the Liberta Prestige skin, decisions about content should ultimately be left to each individual. And it is not right for the developer to restrict a Prestige skin that is obtained through purchase. I should have stood by our initial plans, but I lacked the courage to do so. That's a pretty big deal here. The project director is more or less falling on the sword, and I think that this is a very important thing to do. I know that there's probably a lot more people at fault here, probably amongst this mess, but I do want to also give credit where credit is due, that the project director is willing to take responsibility for what's going on, and he even admits himself that he lacked courage to actually stop this from happening or do a different way about this. I think that, once again, this is a very human response, because typically when it comes to updates like this, let's just be completely blunt, when you have a major company issuing an apology, you know they ran that stuff through freaking ChatGPT. Like, you know they ran it through, like, some form of AI response, and they don't give a shit about what you think. They don't care what you think. They just give you an AI generated response. But it's very clear right off the record that this project director is truly sorry, and is, like I said, falling on the sword and trying to speak as a human being to the actual community instead of allowing an AI to respond like a robot. Anyways, the Liberta Prestige skin will be released in its original form as initially planned. The final choice and judgment will be left to you. As an expression of apology, the skin will be available to everyone free of charge for 4 weeks following the January 15th update. Following recent warnings, we announced a toned-down version of Granadar. I once again probably butchered that name, forgive me. However, I have decided to release her in her original version instead. So once again, the announcements of potential self-censorship was completely removed as well. So this clears up that. It's not just this skin or this character and all that. It's also another individual that was affected by the self-censorship. So once again, very good news, very transparent. Number 3, on revision criteria. Many of you were most concerned about what the standards for modifications are, and which characters might be affected next. Once again, self-censorship. To be honest, the criteria set by external, keyword there, external organizations have been so ambiguous that it was difficult to define them internally as well. My use of the term clearly an adult only led to greater anxiety and mistrust. This was entirely my mistake and responsibility. So once again, the project developer, or director in this case, falling on the sword. But we need to really point this wording out right here. That is the most damning evidence on the perpetrators of what caused this to begin with. External organizations have been so ambiguous that it was difficult to define them internally as well. My use of the term clearly an adult only led to greater anxiety and mistrust. So, anyone that knows what's been going on with Japanese games and media, and even stuff in Korea as well, this 100% sounds super similar to what's been going down with doujins and all sorts of stuff in the Japanese community and industry. Once again, another Asian game or content targeted by individuals that cannot separate fiction from reality. But it doesn't just stop there. This external organizations, I think that is a very big detail here. It's plural. It's not one. It's multiple. Which implies that it's, let's say, it's not just like a country, which is elaborated on. I'll read that in a second. But it's not just the country that's doing this. It's multiple entities coming in after Brown Dust, trying to restrict their very movement in creative expression. So this isn't just, let's just say, a Visa and MasterCard situation, maybe with payment processors, but this is also probably maybe activist groups like Collective Shout, very likely, and this is also probably multiple governments or countries that are also involved in this as well, because the drastic, dire nature of this situation, how quick they were to, like, try to do this, really shows the urgency that this team felt. That it was so urgent, in fact, they were so concerned that they were willing to spit in the face of their community to be able to bow down to whatever external organizations these were. So whatever it was pretty big. Big enough to potentially even cause more damage than the damage that they already caused to the community with their actions and decisions before they made this apology post. That is something to really take away from what is being said here, is that something or some organization or organizations, plural, caused this. About service separation, since Brown Dust 2 operates with the approval of each country's stores, platforms, and rating agencies, suspension in one country could lead to reports and additional reviews by others. I'll get more into that in just a second. That's very important. But right now, monitoring and regulations are becoming stricter worldwide, and Brown Dust 2 has remained under continued scrutiny from multiple agencies. Once again, plural. Even if we offer country-specified versions, as long as the original content exists, service suspension could happen again at any time. I thought that separating service by country would not be a fundamental solution. Frankly, I was deeply concerned that cascading service suspensions could make regular service impossible. For countries in question, we are discussing possible solutions with the relevant regulatory bodies, such as hiding content only in that country, suspending local service, or operating a modified build according to country-specified policy. Since these talks are ongoing, I cannot specify the country at this time, but we will inform you officially as soon as the agreement is reached. We are not trying to ignore any country's regulations. From now on, our one clear principle will be to provide country-specific service, not modified content. If due to specific country or platform requirements, it becomes impossible to maintain service without requiring changes, we will not alter character designs. Instead, our service policy will be to apply country-specified restrictions, suspend service, or provide an adapted build as needed for that country. So more or less, there's a lot of PR here. This is probably the most PR response out of this whole thing. Like, this is more or less directed not just at the community, but mainly at the organizations and the country or countries in question that has caused this entire situation. You can see that the very conversation, like when you look at all these, is very human response. Like, you could tell that this was the project director really trying to respond to the community in earnest, with absolute clarity, with everything they possibly can. You get to number 4. And he tries to be a little bit personal, but you could tell that a lot of this is being very careful and tiptoeing around naming anyone, talking about it too in depth, and their commitments not to the player, but to these countries. That's a pretty big detail to take away from this. They're still afraid. They're still worried. But the question is, who is causing this? So let's unravel this part right here about service separation. So, from what is going on here, it's very clear that there is an obvious concern that if Brown Dust is removed from one store or platform, it's going to lead to a domino effect. For example here, if it's removed from Steam, that means that it will not be allowed probably in other stores. Maybe, let's say, the Google App Store, maybe Apple Store, whatever. It will start getting removed systematically. And so there is a cause of concern if rating agencies or whatever behind the scenes sees this removal from one company or country, they're going to start doing this for everything else, which would effectively strangle the game and kill it. So that is an obvious concern here. which is completely understandable from a business perspective that they don't want their game to end prematurely. They want to be able to offer this to many as people as possible, but in turn, they also want to keep the integrity of the game intact. Obviously, their first reaction to this news was to completely censor everything, to bow down, bend the knee, but they realized that is also not a good idea. They learned the hard way, the community's reaction. But they are in turn saying, okay, they're going to try to find a balance here, but they want to also only restrict content, or at the very least give a different specified version on certain individual countries. So it's more or less kind of like how China works. That's my understanding of this, because like China, when they get like a game or a certain like program or whatever, it's usually different than the version everybody else gets. Like some game releases are radically different in China than, let's say, in the West. Basically, there would be entirely different games for specified countries that are wanting this game to self-censor itself. That is my understanding here, at least what the actual project, director is saying about Brown Dust. But, back into the main topic. What happened? Well, it's very clear a lot of people are coming after Brown Dust. And the sad thing is that this isn't the only company or game that is being targeted. There was a recent thing that came out with GitHub that had to remove a bunch of different Japanese content and coding, which basically implied that even coding, if it's Japanese game coding, it needs to be censored. I think a lot of people are starting to notice the pattern, by the way, like pattern recognition of what content is now starting to be targeted. It's very clear there's been this active push from multiple agencies and companies and just governments to try to censor Korea and Japan. Like, there is just non-stop content. Like, if it's a game from, let's say, Japan trying to release on Steam, heavily censored or completely arbitrarily removed where it's not able to release, so to speak. But if it's a adult game that's like a furry sim, for instance, that's a-okay. Now, I'm not saying that furry games need to be censored either. I'm not personally a big fan of them, but the point of the matter is that they still have a right to exist as well. And what I'm trying to say is there is a very clear distinction and priority focus on, let's say, games from the East instead of games in the West. For instance, if it's an adult game that's releasing in the West that's made by Western developers, it seems to be a-okay to a certain extent. But if it's, let's say, a Japanese game or a Korean game, that is targeted massively by multiple different agencies and governments and companies to force them to self-censor. This is definitely becoming a reoccurring pattern, and I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again, it feels racist. It does. It feels very targeted. And I think the reason why this is happening, my assumption here, is because games from the East, like Korean games and games from China, games from, Japan, they are heavily making games from the West look like fools. Some of the biggest conversations within gaming, for instance, is gacha games. Okay? That's truth. And as much as you don't like that conversation, it is true. And a lot of games, let's say from China, Korea, or Japan, are doing very well. And it's making all these AAA developers look like absolute buffoons. And I feel like with anime and manga as well exploding in popularity, Hollywood is starting to feel trampled upon. Hollywood's not liking how content from the East is trampling upon their media. They don't like that. And so I feel like there is a lot of bad actors and a lot of people with these different malicious intentions to neuter this content before it continues to explode to a point where they can no longer fight back. And I feel like that is what is increasingly becoming more and more obvious, the pattern recognition of this as time continues to progress. At this point, I don't think anybody can really deny just how much this different type of content, especially from certain countries, is being targeted, instead of, let's say, from countries from the EU or countries in the West like America or Canada or whatever, not really being targeted. Very concerning. But, with all that being said, Brown Dust has stated that they don't want to censor it, they will find alternative means, which is good news. It's good news for players. The bad news is that this is going to keep happening, because sadly, it's clear that the project director didn't want to name drop the actual reason to why this happened. Like, for instance, they're not naming names, they're not naming companies and external organizations. They specify it's a country, but that's more or less, I feel like, shifting the blame from a lot of other bad actors. Let's just be honest. It's 100% payment processors. The very line here, down here, let's see here. This line down here, like how he addresses like censorship and how he tones down stuff and the criteria. 100% sounds exactly what the responses from all these different companies in Japan and stuff have had to deal with thanks to payment processors like Visa and MasterCard. It feels exactly identical. Now, this could also be the UK, the EU, or Australia. There's just so many internet laws that are passing trying to restrict content. So it could also be that. But I think it's a mix of everything. Because the very environment right now is very hostile for releasing any game that's meant for adults. Because apparently, even if you're an adult, you still have to be treated like a child, and you're not able to buy things that are legal because you got to be treated like a child. I think that it's incredibly insane where we're going right now in society and how content is being released, because this reaction here, it really just like showcases probably what's happening with anime. It probably really gives an indication to how anime and manga is self-censored at the source. Because this reaction is so insane, you know there's probably untold amount of censorship going on within Japan that we're just completely unaware of. And I feel like the One Punch Man situation really kind of blew the hole on that, like really showcasing how much is going on. And it wasn't probably intentional to showcase that, but it was just very obvious the priorities in the production stages for, let's say, One Punch Man with how much it got censored. I think that there is a lot of this going on that just so many of us are completely unaware of. But I'll leave it at that. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. It does help me out a lot, and I would greatly appreciate it. Leave a like on the video. Helps with the algorithm and the video to be noticed by more people. Please share the video as well, because more people need to be aware of this. And also, hopefully Brown Dust reveals these bad actors and external organizations that caused all this. This needs to happen. But be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.